Welcome, everybody, to the Four Verts podcast. I'm your host, as always, Sonny Weaver. On our show today, we got a very special guest. For you guys familiar with NBL and the Four Verts podcast, we are a CFM, obviously. And so this next guest we have up is near and dear to our heart. We have John White from EA, the head of CFM. How you doing today, John?
Doing great. How about you guys?
Man, we're doing good. As we were just talking a little bit off air before we got started, NBL is going strong here. Still August to August. We're finishing up the last season here right in before Madden 17, so we're excited. But obviously the topic of the day is Madden 17 and really just the general direction and forward movement with CFM. So for some of our listeners that may not be aware, or maybe they just need a quick refresher, let's talk about some of the features for this year's game. When it comes to CFM, you guys, you didn't come out with what I would consider major features, but I think they're definitely building block features. So let's go through a couple of those. What are some of the major features this year from your guys' perspective?
So I think play the moment can really change how you play the mode just in general. You're able to get through seasons much quicker. You're just jumping in and letting Super Sim take over part of the game. And you're able to watch and follow the game go along, and then certain key parts of the game, kind of like the Red Zone channel, we prompt you and let you jump right into the action. So you're able to get through games much quicker than the whole season much quicker. So people are able to get through like a season in a weekend. So it doesn't help necessarily the online guys. It's just like all their games they like to play online. But most of the guys that we talk to that play online also have offline leagues they love playing with as well, just solo leagues. And you're able to get through a season much quicker, and those guys have been really enjoying it as they've been getting their hands on it.
So with that play the moment, let's hit on this a little bit, because that actually works into something I wanted to talk about. You've got connected franchise, and so there's guys that play it offline and those that play it online. Some of the offline guys that really aren't interested in the online interaction, I had one person ask me about the ability to switch between offenses, right? So in their season, they just want to play the offensive side of the ball for both teams all the time. Play the moment is almost like a step towards that, but that's not in there this year, is it?
No, I mean you can take over control of the other owners and then move your controller over and then handle it that way. But I've definitely talked with some of those guys, but their exact use case is not in the game right now.
But one of the things I like is that you guys are still listening and you guys are still paying attention to that demographic within CFM. So CFM isn't just about one side or the other. And I know that at one point, I think it may have been last year, 2 years ago, when you guys first released some of the newer features for CFM, some of the experience sliders and things like that weren't available for the offline guys. And I think they felt a little bit possibly left behind. So it appears like this year you guys have come back around and really tried to create the same experience for both offline and online players.
Yeah, and really it was much more of a tech issue than a desire. Last year with XP sliders, we weren't trying to shun the offline players and not give them those features. We really wanted to get that with them as well, but there was no way for us to do it without spending a lot of time to give it to them last year. But it came for free basically this year. So it wasn't a conscious effort by our part to kind of shun people. And our thoughts was, all right, well, we could do this really cool feature, get it out to the people that create their online leagues, and all those guys and girls can take advantage of it, or we could wait for the whole feature for next year. And we were like, well, let's go ahead and get it out and give people those controls this year.
And that kind of goes into that whole idea of continuous development. We talked to Jake Stein on a previous version of the Four Verts podcast, and he talked about the continuous development you guys have invested in last year. Rolling into this year, that just because something doesn't necessarily ship with the game doesn't mean it may not end up getting there. And so as we look forward to this year, I think a lot of people, they've got their own features here or there that they wish would make the game, but just because it's not there on release doesn't mean it's not going to be in the game this year, correct?
Yes, and certain features are much harder to add throughout the year than others. A franchise has a lot of moving parts, and all the systems and mechanics are talking with each other. So adding features along the way, like really um, really core features along the way is tougher to do. Adding like supplementary type features like sliders and those types of things are much more realistic to add, post release. But some of the bigger features, they're definitely harder to add for a mode like franchise.
So we talked about play the moment, and the community is interesting. Sometimes even, I don't know the right word, maybe decisive, or divisive, maybe, in that they want to classify people. Are you a hardcore gamer? Are you a casual gamer? So on. Play the moment would probably fall towards more of the casual gamer, maybe the offline gamer, but I think a lot of the people in the hardcore gaming world are interested in maybe some of the other features you added this year. And there were some really cool features I think you guys added this year that may be getting undersold a little bit. The one to me that is really of interest that I think you guys are really heading down the right path with is the game planning. And I think the game planning could be a great thing. So maybe expand on game planning a little bit for some of our listeners that aren't aware of that.
Definitely. And I just want to touch on real quick about first part of your question about the different types of people that play the mode. And that's something that's always really fun when we bring in groups of people, whether they're the local people that come in or we have a play test in another city, or the really hardcore guys that come in that are really dedicated on the forums. They all come with their different perspective. And even what's interesting to me is like the guys that you would quote unquote say they're the hardcore guys, they want different features as well. And it really comes down to the types of experiences that you're looking to and the things that you enjoy, more than whether you're hardcore or not. For example, like how I classify people, based on a lot of the people we've been talking about. We have the simulators. They're the guys that like to sim seasons, and they're all about the team management side of things. Like they're not necessarily going in and playing every game every week. They're more of like liking to get to the draft and scout and those guys. So those guys are really the simulators, and that's who I think play the moment can really help, because they can jump in and still have core gameplay experience throughout the season, but do it at a much quicker pace. On top of that, we have guys that just like to play through a season with their favorite team. These guys like to play every game every week. They like playing with their favorite team. They want to take their team to the Super Bowl. They play, from 1 to 3, 4 seasons, but they like to really like live and play everything about their team. So there's definitely, those are just a couple, and there's more types as well, like people that like to play fantasy draft. That's something I've learned recently, is there's a lot of people that really enjoy the fantasy draft. They like to draft their teams, make trades, and it's all about creating this fantasy league. And those are the guys that are asking for relocation and some of those other like core elements to the mode. But I just wanted to throw that out there because it's just a different way to think about the types of fans that we have, and it's something I spend a lot of time for, because I want to make sure each year we're able to hit on features for every type of user. All of our fans that come and buy the game each year, you want to have features for them. So really understanding them and learning what they like is something I spend a lot of time doing.
Yeah, and so that's interesting. And I've talked with some of the other developers about some of the struggles you guys deal with, and that just in general gameplay mechanics and things like that. You have so many different modes in there that really appeal to so many different people. It's tough to build a game that really satisfies everybody, and you guys are doing a good job of trying to provide the most content really for your money when you think about it with the different modes within there. But even within those modes, like you mentioned, they are segmented out even further to different people that play each mode differently. Maybe if you look to the MUT side, there's the guys that do it more for the competition, the playing. There's another group I'm sure within there that just does it for the card collecting type feel that provides.
Yeah, and that's just it's just another way for us to think about it, because like we've got the offline and online side as well. and that's why we renamed it to Cloud, because you can play online solo and have a really great experience with the league simming quicker and some of the other tuning updates. We actually get tuning updates out in the online leagues faster than we do the offline, because we're able to deploy out updates via the server versus having to wait for a console patch. So there's a lot of benefits to playing, a cloud or online league, even if you're playing solo. So it's just another way of us to think about it, is segmenting to how people play versus like what like what they play, I guess would
Y-
be the way to frame it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely makes sense.
but to go back to your original question about game planning, I really enjoy game planning the way we implement it this year. I think it's really a great foundation for us. You kind of mentioned that as well, where you're able to pick an offensive and defensive game plan each week, get a medal in it, and then that medal is stored, based on how well you do in that drill that week, um, at a certain level, and then we store that so you can sim it at that level moving forward. Um, on top of that, you can still choose your 3 focus players each week, so you can really target those rookies or target those, your superstars to try to develop them better, which is something that when we talked a lot about game prep, the previous iteration of this feature was people really like to target individual players, but it became hard to do. And this made it, really easy for you to just set your three guys each week. And on top of that, the offensive and defensive game plan is really cool, because it's picked based on your opponent's tendencies. So playing in an online league, and you've got your other people out there playing, you can see exactly what kinds of schemes they're running with, and game plans will be picked for you, and then you can override them and choose whatever you want. But the tie to the game itself is what's really exciting too, because not only um, is the actual training experience a lot more fun because we have new drills in there as well, but the tie into the game, where you run the verticals concept, for example, in game, your vertical concept plays have a little bit of a boost, and that boost will help you. Your team will perform better. It's nothing that's going to unbalance the game or anything, but your team does have a strength for that week, which is something that we've never had before, and something that I think really adds a lot to the feature and makes it feel meaningful to do each week.
Yeah, so the concept of practice actually helping you in a game is something maybe foreign to Madden, but it's obviously something that I think a lot of people have been clamoring for a while. So it's well received. Something you kind of hit on in there, and I've gotten some questions about it. Obviously, I put out you were coming on here, and received some feedback. And one I got a couple times was kind of in regards, you mentioned targeting specific players, and that goes back to a couple years ago. You guys kind of made a shift to an RPG element of XP for players. How do you guys think that's being received internally and externally? And have you guys ever considered going back to more of a hidden, naturally progression type system?
We have talked about that, and there's definitely a user base that's interested in that kind of experience. Overall, though, I think most people, the vast majority, really enjoy the XP system um, that we have in there. I mean, people talk about improvements to it, but in general, people like the direction that it's in right now. That being said, do I think there's a way that we could try to craft an experience for those other types of fans? Yeah, I definitely do, and it's something I've thought about, and we've talked about trying to see ways to make it more off-season driven, less in your face, like those kinds of things. So I mean, you'll see a little bit of that in the game, where we have some settings. You can turn off XP notifications and some of those things. But on top of that, in bottom line ticker, you can turn off notifications from that, as you just seen the scores. But some of the feedback around people not liking XP is because they felt that the XP purchasing process was really monotonous and annoying. So we've really focused, and we have a whole new post-game experience where you can quickly apply your XP to your players, and not see a full list of your players, but just some players that are recommended to upgrade right then that you can then act on, or you can ignore it. But just adding that flow, some of the people that wasn't enjoying the XP experience, all of a sudden we're like, oh no, this is actually really fun. I'm able to level these guys up, and they're seeing like a really big, return on that. Speaking of XP, we added it back in Madden 13, but we run playtests and had a lot of fans come in, and some people didn't even know XP was what was driving the mode. They didn't know it existed. So that was why we were like, okay, well, we need to spend some time, surface this feature, make it fun to interact with, and actually blow it out into a nice feature where people can, it's designed in such a way that it was originally intended to. And we've gotten a lot of positive reactions based on that to a lot of our playtests. But
I think you're right there with the XP being after the games. I think that's going to help. That is one of probably the most monotonous tasks in sport, maybe next to the former way game prep was done. Game prep was very similar in that lots of clicking for little reward, long periods of time doing that. So improvement to it, I think you're on the right track there with possibly coming up with a little bit of a fix for that. So good to hear that. Now, we're talking about the game planning mode, which is kind of a offshoot of practicing. You guys unlocked last year the ability to free practice with your team. You give a mouse a cookie and they're going to keep wanting more. So I know a lot of people now are asking for more involved in that free practice. Things like running 2-minute drills, being able to set up game situations you want to practice on, and some of the likes of that. Is that something you guys have considered and looked at ways of maybe trying to get that into the game?
Yeah, and right now our free practice mode is built on the practice mode from the main menu, so you can go and play practice with the roster teams as well. So that's a popular mode as well. So having building onto that and adding situational based practice into it, it makes a lot of sense, and something that we've talked about, but we obviously didn't go after that this year. But yeah, a lot of people love practicing with their team. It's one of those things. It's like you've got all these players together that you spent, and you spend a lot of time pulling them together, and then especially in an online league where it's like you want to play with them more and really feel your team, and you weren't able to do that aside from inside games or in practice, which once you ran out of time, you couldn't play with them anymore. So it's definitely something that was needed in the mode, and I was really happy we were able to get that last year, which we actually released as part of a title update as well.
Yep, more continuous development. We love it. Obviously, anytime you buy something and then down the line get more than what you paid for when you first bought it, people I think are always going to be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, and it's really a time thing for us. Like, we only have so much time each year to put in features, and we have a really long list of features that we want to add. And you get to the end of the year and you're just not able to get it all in. So the continuous development model, especially the patches, the updates, shortly after launch, like, we really try to, those things that we weren't able to get onto the disk, we're still in that momentum, and we want to keep building some features. Those are the times where, it becomes a little bit easier for us to add some of that stuff that, some of those top requests that we hear in playtests, or, just the top holes in the mode. We're able to, plug those holes and make a more fun experience. So something that I'm really excited about, trying to keep pursuing for this year as well.
From practice to practice squad, the next kind of feature I want to touch on is the practice squad. You added it in this year. A great feature that I think from a CFM standpoint, where you really do draft guys to develop them, it gives you a chance to hang on to those guys. So maybe talk a little bit about that whole practice squad element and kind of the driving force behind getting that into CFM this year.
Well, I'm a big proponent. Like, anything you see in the NFL, any core element to the NFL, you expect it to be in franchise. Franchise is the is like the mode that's supposed to embody like what the NFL is, like the schedule, the right schedule, the right players, like all that. So, not having a practice squad was just, just was one of those holes that, I mentioned just a few minutes ago. And we really wanted to get that in, and we were able to get that in this year, and I'm really excited about it. Each team has 10 players, and you're able to, instead of cutting players at week 4 of the preseason, you're able to just shift them right to the practice squad, so they're contained in your team. That being said, other teams can poach your guys off your practice squad, just like in real life. We do have a setting that you can turn that off, but it's something that you're able to stash some of those guys like that are right on the bubble that you think could potentially develop into something you're looking for, or if injuries start rocking your team, there's a couple stables that you could jump in and pull out without having to search the whole free agency. So it's definitely makes life a lot easier to manage your team, and it brings that authenticity to the mode that I expect to be there.
And so you've got one part of it, and that's the practice squad. Have you guys looked at adding the active game day roster limits, making guys pick the guys who are actually going to make active 4 games each week?
Yeah, we've definitely talked about that. And when we were weighing features, that one just wasn't as high on the list as like the practice squad, where it's actually a set of players that you can now have as part of your team. And we made bigger draft classes to support it. We made we moved cut logic around to make that experience more interesting. So there was a lot around that feature that made it like a bigger feature and something that a lot of people will enjoy. The active roster discussion is definitely a feature that we have on our list. It's just wasn't as high in the priority list.
And so listeners will hear that often, the list, right? And so anybody that does development understands that you got to basically have a place you consolidate all the ideas, and then you have to start assigning resources out of that. You mentioned, and we've heard a lot about it being a yearly release, and you guys have to allocate man hours here or there. Maybe talk a little bit about your thought process when allocating. How do you really decide where you want to allocate man hours to when it comes to some of these, maybe not back of the box features, but some of the other features that go into CFM?
Yeah, so good question. Our development process, it's obviously limited. We have to release a game every year, so that means that we have to, basically stop production and make sure we polish it and fix as many bugs as possible. So we don't have like a full year necessarily to build features. So that's obviously a little bit more of a limiting factor because we have to polish it up and get it on the store shelves in a good spot. That being said, yeah, I mean we have to make decisions on what we build, and that comes down to prioritizing. So we have a list of features that come a lot from the various community members, comes from our experiences playing the mode, comes from external like other play tests that we monitor. Guys off the street that aren't necessarily really active on forums, but they love to play the game. Those are people that we bring in and have them play, and we're able to learn things from them about what they want or what they're not having fun with. So we take all this information and then we basically stack rank it and decide where which features are the highest priority. And we only have so many resources, so many people working on the mode, and we devote them to those various ones and figure out kind of how far down that list we'll be able to get this year. And along the way, we'll make changes based on play tests and feedback we get on the mode as we're building it, which can kind of change priority of some features. But that's just kind of like how we work. We try to be agile in that we can react and try to readjust things as we get more information.
So you said something in there. I want to give you a chance to debunk a myth that I think people use as a crutch to complain on. Is the MUT development team bigger than the CFM development team?
Oh, absolutely not. Especially not this year. There were a ton of people working on franchise this year. Definitely more people than we're building MUT this year.
Yeah, and I talked to Jake about that a little bit, but there seems to be another almost war between those two sides as they feel one may get shafted instead of the other. So it's always nice to reiterate that they are separate development teams, not beholden to each other. So just wanted to go ahead and throw that in there for everybody's sake going forward. So we talked about some of the authenticity items, and you mentioned you're a big proponent of that. There have been some features that through past Maddens back in the day that have been there, they're no longer there. That I think some people clamor for things like coaching staffs that actually do something, offensive, defensive coordinators, restricted free agents, formation subs, things like that. What are some maybe authenticity features that you want? And obviously, you don't have to reveal your board, but what are some things you personally would like to see in this game in the near future?
I mean, there's so many features and so many experiences I want to add to the mode. I mean, uh, player mode, I'd like to make that more robust. I mean, that's a big request we get from a lot of our fans. They want to be drafted, they want the combine, they want to live that life of that player. And it's something we've had in previous Maddens that we don't currently have, and it's something that is definitely top of my mind. You mentioned coordinators and those types of elements actually having a really big impact, and that's something um, that I'm a big proponent on. Is when we add a feature, make sure that the feature has the core that you would want. Could we, you know, there's like the baseline of a feature that we could add, but I don't want to go. I'd rather add the right version. Like I don't want to go add like a half-baked version and then not ever get it fully realized. That's kind of where my head's at with a lot of these. You mentioned coordinators. Like if I had a coordinator in the game, I'd expect to see him on the sidelines. I would, expect some sort of list of, real life coordinators. I expect a coaching pool where, coordinators could turn into head coaches. Like there's a whole suite of elements around that makes it a fairly sizable feature. Obviously nothing that's impossible to do or anything like that, but it's a pretty large feature, and it's something that I wouldn't want to add like a half-baked version of.
And that's always appreciated. I think, honestly, you've got some stuff there on the Mutt side to borrow from as far as team chemistry and things like that you could import with those coordinators to provide, boosts to certain things, certain types of, attributes and so on. But I'm sure you guys got that all mapped out, and hopefully we see it someday. Um, the different versions and different way people play Madden, especially CFM. I play in more of the hardcore side. Obviously, NBL, we do things very as real as possible. You guys obviously have shown support for that side of the community in the past. Have you ever looked at adding tools to the game to try to help create that full immersion? Things like the ability to suspend players in game. Maybe tools to manage your CFM better on the outside, drafting offline, that kind of stuff that allows us that really want to be full immersion, that really want to play every aspect of the game all the way through to make that an easier job for us with things from inside of the game.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the big features this year, full player editing, was really drive to help commissioners and people with a lot of large leagues get in and make adjustments as they see fit. You never want to have a mode wherein 4 years or 5 years into the league, there's something wrong about it, and a owner feels like slighted by something that happened to his team. Like we tried to add these tools to go in, and so the commissioner, of course, commissioner approval, able to go in and make adjustments to make the whole league happy and then keep functioning. But I love online leagues. Every year I'm always in at least one. I've been playing. I played Dynasty back in NCAA years. I love playing with a group of my friends and try to go all the way. It makes for a very exciting experience. So, obviously, I've haven't been in a 32-man, league as intense as the league that you guys put on, which is really great. I love watching the videos that you guys put out there for that. But yeah, we're always thinking about trying to add tools and add functionality for those types of users because they're a very important part of the mode.
So obviously there's the season itself, the gameplay, and so on. Let's talk a little bit about the off season. Free agency. Now, one of maybe the most underappreciated things that hasn't really been reported on this year is the order of which free agents sign. Historically, the best guys waited till the end, putting you in a bad position as not having a week to sign a fallback plan. If you wanted the top guy, it was basically top guy or bust. And my understanding is this year that logic's been kind of flipped a little bit, giving you a chance of going after the top guys, but knowing you can hit that second tier of free agency without missing out on either or on that.
Yes, that was exactly the goal for this year in the free agent bidding tuning. We wanted to have like waves of players. So like the first week, all the top tier guys, they get a lot of bids, and then they go off the board. So then you start focusing on the next tier and the next tier. So it mimics more of what you would see in real life, where most of the top prospects are signed up pretty quickly after free agent bidding process or free agency starts in the off season. So yeah, we really tried to adjust that to make that experience a little bit more realistic and also more fun because you're able to interact with multiple players throughout multiple weeks.
The bidding process has been a place, I think, a sticking point for some people because you see who's bidding against you, and you can kind of see as the price gets shoved higher because you see that other guys are winning, and that price can kind of escalate quickly and get out of hand at times. Have you guys thought about maybe hiding that? Or I mean, if we're looking for realistic, I don't necessarily know what New England's paying for somebody or Carolina's paying for somebody, but I kind of know my price I want to pay for a guy, and if that puts me on top or bottom, that's only something the player may know.
Yeah, I mean, Madden, the franchise definitely, tons and tons of people play it. It is the most popular mode, and because of that, there's a lot of people have different thoughts about each feature. The free agent bidding, so we did make some improvements on there where you submit your offer, you get feedback immediately about what the player thought about your offer, and then you're able to see the stack rank based on the points that you went after. Now, that's obviously the opposite side of what you were just suggesting, but my thought is if you're going to give someone some visibility into an experience, like you need to make sure they can completely understand and control what they want. Previously, when it was just the little team logos, people were like, okay, well, am I in front? Am I in back? And then people didn't have a good idea of how that system was working, and they became frustrated by it. So by adding, what was always there was this point system behind the hood that was kind of grading your salary, your contract offer. We're actually surfacing that now, so you can have more control and actually see what's going on. Now, the one counterpoint I would say to your suggestion that as the Falcons, I don't know what the Bucks are going to pay or trying to pay for this guy. Well, like these agents are going to be playing you against each other, obviously, in the real life, so you're going to have some idea there. That being said, do I think the free agent bidding offer experience could be improved further? Of course I do. I'd love to add settings for people and leagues to control like how many bidding stages there are, whether things are hidden or shown. Like those are all the elements that I think would really help it be a little bit more interesting and appeal to all the types of fans that use it. But I do think we've definitely made a lot of improvements to that space this year with the tuning and with surfacing better of what your choices and what your interactions are with it.
So one counter to that, agents lie, and any GM who listens to them shouldn't be there.
And the player may not take the highest offer too. There's definitely a little chance where he may decide to go with that other team.
That's something I wanted to talk to you about. And there's a couple things in that bidding process that I think are still unknowns. One of those being previously you obviously saw things like location and scheme and things like that. How much of an effect did those actually have on that bidding process?
Sometimes sometimes more than others. I mean, throughout the years where that was added, like it's been tuned, several different ways to try to make sure players are behaving properly. We do a lot of simulations where we simulate lots and lots of seasons, and we use that data, and we're like we look at it to see what players are doing through the sim engine. So we really try to make sure that the AI logic is really sound. So sometimes the AI logic and trying to tune and fix some of those issues that we're seeing there kind of drives how the user is interacting with that feature as well. So sometimes we add an element to its like location preference or something, and we have it tuned a certain way, but then we start simulating, and then we end up having to tune it back because players aren't, everyone wants to go to New England or something. Like we start seeing behavior that's not very realistic or appealing, so we end up having to dial it down. This year, though, I mean, you are able to see when you submit your bid a breakdown of what the player thought about it. So the player may think more, value more your salary versus the length of the contract, but you're able to see like how your points are driven based on your offer, which is something that you haven't had before. That's actually a pretty cool element that we were able to add this year.
Yeah, the feedback will obviously be appreciated. And I think even in the version that we talked about not seeing who's in the lead, I think the feedback is still nice to get because you may not know you're the number one, but you know that he liked your money, he liked your such and such. So that's good to know. Something in there you did mention was that the highest bid doesn't always win. And so that's something I think is very interesting to hear. I think a lot of guys get discouraged if they see the little yellow money sign next to someone not named them, and they just go ahead and pull their bid. So just confirmation here, that is a possibility to not necessarily give them the most money, but still come out on top.
Yes, I mean there is a threshold. Like just because you're second doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have a shot at getting them if your offer is so much lower than the first guy's. But if there's 2, 3, however many offers, like they're near each other, there's some chance that it may not be the guy number one on that list that is picked up.
That's good to know. And like I said, I think the free agency, the rework there could be one of the most underrated but most appreciated features of CFM this year. So very happy about that. Where I want to finish up kind of here, working our way throughout the season, and that's with the draft. You guys put in some work to re-engineer the draft system as far as the scouting system last year. Feedback you've gotten on that, what are some things that you think about the draft system? I know personally, and from people I've talked to, the whole idea that we're all we're all scouting the same guys. We all, finding those steals is tough because we all kind of get through the whole list of draftable guys and say, yeah, I know that guy's only projected in the 6th round, but he's really one of the best guys, and so I'm going to go ahead and still take him early.
Yeah, I mean, we gave a lot of scouting points last year in response to people saying they didn't have enough information. We obviously changed the scouting system last year, and I think overall it's definitely a much cleaner, easier way to interact with the mode or interact with that draft class as you're going throughout the year. But I would like to see that increased, spend more time on it and make it even a more immersive experience. But in terms of this year, we definitely spent time on several aspects around the draft. I'll kind of list off a couple of them that come to my mind. First one was the scouting points. So we flipped the scouting points. So instead of being 5, 10, 15, it's now 15, 10, 5. So that means that you're not going to be able to get that first attribute unlocked for everyone that you could last year. Also, on top of that, our scouting class is a lot bigger now. It's a good chunk bigger, And so you're not going to be able to definitely scout, everyone in the class. Also, a lot of the undrafted guys, down there, the bottom tier down there, you're not going to be able to get those tells like you could now. Obviously, in a 32-man league, some teams are going to know about some players, but all 32 teams aren't going to know about all players. So that's definitely a core element to it. On top of that, we've updated the portraits for them so they look better now. The tuning side was something we spent a lot of time on. We had a guy work on that for a bunch of weeks, trying to make sure that the draft class matches the base rosters, and that goes across dev trait, that goes across ratings. So we're looking at everything about the players being generated to make sure that the rookies are going to come in like the base roster rookies were in year one. So a lot of times went into there, and I think it's something that you'll be able to appreciate as you start playing with it.
So my first question is, will cornerbacks be as strong as linebackers?
Good question. Those are some of the bugs that we addressed there. No, they're not going to be as strong. There's also some other ratings. Some people were moving. I'm trying to remember what that use case. People were moving. Was it corners to halfbacks? There was some other rating that one other skill position had that made him better than the other one. Anyway.
Oh, okay.
We found a lot of those issues. We fixed them, and I think you'll be really happy with where the draft class ended up. We also removed some of the tells for the draft class stories that you see in the news system. So some of those, you're not going to always get the high dev trait guys from those stories. So some of those stories will now give you slow or a lot of them normal. So there's definitely not a tell there like there has been in the past.
And that's good because you've talked about, exposing more, giving more. And I think it's good that you're trying to find a balance of, hey, there's things they need to know, things they don't need to know. So that's good to hear. The draft classes, are they specifically designed, or is there something in the algorithm there that says, hey, this is going to be a good quarterback class, or this is going to be a good cornerback class? Last year it seemed like it was there, but it always seemed like defensive tackle was a great class every year, and I wasn't sure if that was a bug or if that just was perception.
So we don't have in right now about like a theme for the draft class. It's something we talked about this year about trying to add, but our system was not set up to support that, and we obviously spent our time elsewhere. That being said, there is we create all these player types, and there's random elements to it that some years you can have a really big quarterback class. Some years you don't hardly see any quarterbacks that are like you would in a quarterback heavy year. So it's just it's kind of roll the dice to a certain extent, but it does give you that feeling that those things exist, and it's something that we definitely would like to add more tuning elements for, so the fans can actually control the draft classes, and actually whether it's importing or and tuning the generators to create the class that they're looking for. Whether it's they feel like there needs to be a bunch of monster tight ends coming out one year, they could do that. Those are all the controls that we talked about trying to add this year, and we're pretty high on our list. We just didn't quite make it. So we spent a lot of time tuning it though, and we really feel like where they are is the best they've ever been.
And that was one of the issues. I know obviously you guys tried to address that last year after release. There were some guys that just weren't coming out quite right. And so if they fit into the mold of the current rookies and so on, I think that will be a big help going forward, because it seemed like you almost wanted – we used to joke that you wanted to pick a team with a bad quarterback because the Madden quarterback was going to be the best quarterback you could get. So just pick a team with a bad quarterback and draft one year one, and you'll be set to go. So fitting into that mold is a great thing. Obviously, you've been great with your time, so I just want to finish up here with something more on a personal note here. So you're a Falcons fan, which I'm assuming means you're going to be running a Falcon CFM. As the Falcons GM, what's the first personnel move you will make with the Atlanta Falcons?
Oh, that's a good question. You mean cutting or trading or drafting? What are you?
Well, it could be anything. Obviously, you're the GM, so you could do whatever. But you sitting at home, you're a fan, and obviously every fan has a personal opinion that they feel like the GM just needs to do. Maybe it's a guy the team won't give up on. Maybe it's a target you think they need to go out and get. What are you going to do when you sit down and start mapping out your CFM?
So, I live and breathe the Falcons as much as I possibly can, and so all the players on the team, I look at them more on a personal level than I do he's just a name on a spreadsheet, and these are his ratings. So I really like to try to make all the players on my team. I don't try to get rid of the whole team or start dropping people left and right. There's sometimes a couple guys, especially when the season starts, it starts getting annoying, and I start dropping them. But right now, as a NFL fan, you got to be optimistic about your team, right? Like, they've made some off-season moves, they've picked up some guys in the draft. You got to be optimistic about those guys and expect them to do great things. So right now, I'm not looking to go drop a bunch of people or change it up. What I really like to think about is like future building through scouting and drafting. So some of the holes, like I want like a really solid wide receiver, second wide receiver. We obviously have Julio, but and we got the wide receiver 2 right now, but from the Bengals. But we're right now in Madden, he's not the best wide receiver 2 out there, and he's probably not going to develop in Madden that way. Now I could go in and full player edit him to what I would expect or hope him to be like, but I'll probably be targeting a wide receiver in the draft, and probably a tight end as well. So you have to have those core offensive elements. Our running back is nice and staffed. Our stacked. Our quarterback situation solid. O-line got a little bit better this year, bringing in Mac. So our defense is getting a lot better. But so those are the 2 big holes I see right now in year 2 for the Falcons. But I think overall the Falcons are going to be a fun team to play with.
Is your quarterback situation okay? Because I see Dustin poking you a little bit, and I heard that there may have been some internal rallying to get Matt Ryan's attributes up a little bit. How do you feel about Matt Ryan and his relationship to Andy Dalton as far as the ratings go?
So I listen to some NFL podcasts. They have the Dalton scale, which is I don't know if you listen to Around the League guys, but such thing as the Dalton scale, where that was like the middle quarterback. If you're higher than Andy Dalton, you're a franchise quarterback. If you're lower than Andy Dalton, you're not. But that was back, a couple years ago. Of course, he had a pretty good season this last season, so people think a little bit more highly on him. But in terms of Matt Ryan, I definitely think he's a very solid, top-tier quarterback. Last year, I think he struggled. It's pretty obvious in some of the stat categories. But since being in the league, there's been, very few quarterbacks that have been as solid over the last however many years he's been in at this point. You look at some of his first-year stats, not first year, but first span stats up until this last season. They were really solid. He was top tier across the board for many, many, many years in a row. I think he struggled in the new system this past year, and hopefully, he's a smart guy, or at least he seems like he's a smart guy. I think he's going to learn and improve this year and be back at the top of his game again. But people have a very short memory, and everyone's thinking about Matt Ryan as this last year, but he's been a very top tier quarterback since he's been in the league. But being on the Falcons, he doesn't get as much prime time or as much respect as some of the other teams can get across the league.
some people would even say Dustin has a short memory. So obviously, what if you were doing the rating for Matt Ryan, what would Matt Ryan's rating be overall?
So, I'm kind of with, there's a movement on Twitter. People are like, OVR is not like the end all be all. And I definitely agree with that. Because, OVR takes into account a lot of ratings, but, depending on how you're playing with that player, some of those ratings may not mean as much to you. And that's where I would look. And also, our rating scales change a lot. The last few years, if you remember 5 years ago, we had, a ton 99s and, a ton of 97 pluses. And like now we don't have that many. Like, so being a 90 plus player is a really solid honor in Madden, which it didn't always used to be. There used to be a ton of 90 plus. So, OVR, I feel like I forget where he ended up, honestly. Because the big thing with me in franchise is the dev trait. The dev trait is really important. Having a superstar, having a quick is really important. It drives how long they stay in the league, how much they regress, how much they progress. The XP we give out to those is much higher. So that's really important to me. And Ryan is a quick on the rosters. So,
John, you're sidestepping the question there. This was about taking a shot at Dustin here. So obviously, you're moving it. I could ask you to go through every one of his ratings and say what you would have made those. The easiest one was, and the quickest line of sight is at OVR. So rapid fire, Matt Ryan. I say Matt Ryan. You say overall of.
Okay. You have Dustin's roster up. What does he have him at right now?
I don't know. You're unbreakable. I can tell you Andy Dalton's a 87. Higher or lower than Andy Dalton?
Oh, I think he needs to be higher than Andy Dalton.
Okay, so John White thinks Matt Ryan should be an 88. Make sure it goes out on Twitter. Make sure to @equipment_guru. John White demands it.
And I said this earlier. I said this on Twitter too. We have full player editing. You can just go in and you can edit whoever you want to whoever you want. Having Dustin's job it's a very challenging job to have. There's thousands of players out there in the league, and you're not going to appease everyone in the community with the ratings you give out. So, I like to give him a hard time, but, I respect him. He's got, he knows a lot about a lot of players, and I think he does a really solid job overall.
How do you think Dustin feels that you gave everybody the ability to do his job? Is that more of like a, hey, everybody, if it's so easy, do it yourself? Or is it like, you know what, Dustin, don't worry about it. If you don't get it right, we'll just let everybody else do it.
It's funny, but, honestly, the full player editing is more about editing, in year 2, year 3, year 4, because we've always had the ability to import a roster into the league, so you can go into the front end settings and front end manage rosters and edit it there and then import it. So that's been there. But in terms of editing during the season, when you're playing along and you're like, oh, you know what? I just noticed this guy, I don't feel like is rated right, and you can go in and you can tweak him then. But you know what? I think Dustin does a solid job, and I think he's all right about us adding full player editing. I don't think he takes it too personally.
Well, that's good. As long as everything's in good fun. Obviously, Matt Ryan throwing a pig to a coach today. Everybody's going to have a field day with that on you, I'm sure. And so, it's all in good fun. Hey, John, appreciate you coming on. Obviously, all of us here, Fourverse Podcast, NBL, and CFM in general, we appreciate all the work you're doing. Like the vision, like the way you're going, and hopefully keep doing that. And we'll have to make sure to get you on here again later in the year, maybe when some continuing development content comes out.
Sounds great. Can't wait to talk to you guys again.
All right, thanks. Make sure everybody check out more NBL Network content. Obviously, if you're on the YouTube channel here, like and subscribe. We got some other nice shows there. John mentioned earlier in the day, put out some good videos, so check those out. For all of us here at the Fourverse Podcast, thank you for tuning in today, and we'll see you next week.